I think we can get started. So I know that there was a lot of incredible talks at the same time. Thank you all for showing up to this one. Hopefully I can provide some value for you. I'm going to go over what I have been doing for the last 4 months, basically digging through a lot of unstructured data to come up with some key insights on this LLMs in production survey that we did in the MLOps community. And hopefully, I put in a few jokes too, because I know it's been a long conference and this is the end of the long conference, so I'm gonna try and keep you all awake, all right? Now, let's get it going. Before we do, how's the conference been? Yeah, and maybe like round of applause for the conference, yeah? Has it been that good? That was like you all are at an opera and like, oh, yes, it was all right. So was it good or was it all right? Yeah, it was all right. It was good. We're getting some. Yeah, there we go. He is stoked about it. I like that. I like that. It's nice to see so many friendly faces. I am Demetrios. I run the MLOps.Community. And the MLOps community is a place where a lot of practitioners that are doing machine learning, or these days, large language models, and trying to actually get business value out of them and put them into production, we get together and we have a whole place where we hang out and talk about this all day, every day. So I'll go over what exactly that is later, but I don't think that's why you came to this talk. I think you came to the talk because you wanted to know what are some key insights from people that are actually using large language models in production. Out of the crowd, who here is using large language models in production already? Can we get a show of hands? Yeah? All right, so like a few people on this half of the room, nobody over here. All right, cool. So the good thing about this survey is that it was a survey of people that are using large language models in production and people that aren't. So we got all kinds of data on what people are doing and why they're doing it, and then what they are doing and why they're not using large language models in production. So great. Now, let's talk about who participated in this survey. I'm just going to go through some of my highlights of the survey, and I'm actually going to leave a link in case you want to look at the report that I created. So if you ever want to say, hey, you know what? That survey or that report was cool. I want to send it to somebody. We have it. It's up, and I'll share the link with you all when the time comes. Now let's look at who actually participated. There were the usual suspects of the MLOps community. We have a lot of these personas in the community, so it makes sense. A lot of ML engineers, data scientists, and then some head ofs, and you have founders, CTOs. Some product people flew in there, and other is like cloud engineer, or we had a head of marketing that did some of this survey. So that's a little bit of the mix. And as I mentioned, the report is out there for you, and not only is the report out there for you, but all of the data that everyone filled out, the whole corpus of the survey data, it's all out there. We open sourced that too. And so if you want to go and you want to look through it and get your own insights, I encourage you to do that. Don't just take my word for what I'm about to tell you, because it is very insightful to go through each one of these responses. This report is more for the person, it's like the TLDR. It's for the person who doesn't have hours or months to wrestle around with the data, right? So I'm going to start with a few caveats, just because I think it is important to give you some disclaimers. And the first disclaimer is that 90% of the answers that people gave, it was a free text form. And that means that these takeaways that I'm giving to you, they are highly subjective, right? That goes without saying. So that's why I encourage you to go and look at it if you have the time. But the other thing is that it's a blessing and a curse to have 90% free text form, right? Blessing because this is such a new field. I had no idea what people were going to say, so I didn't want to direct them in one way or another. I didn't want to do a drop-down or a multiple choice because who knows if I'm going to cover everything. And then the free text form is able to capture all this stuff because it's free range. You can talk about whatever. You can talk about why the sky is blue and why that messes with your large language model, right? That's the blessing. But then the curse is that I spent so much time trying to bucket answers and say, where are the insights here? What can I look at? I mean, I imagine a lot of you have played around with unstructured data, so I'm preaching to the choir here. You know how hard it can be. And next time I learned that I'm not going to do 90% free text form boxes. When we do this again, I'm going to lead people a little bit and just give a little bit less free text form. And the other main caveat is that I am not Gartner. Do not expect Gartner-level report from me, all right? I just have to say that right now. I got a lot of great feedback on this, but then some people wrote me back and were like, well, what's this graph about? What's that? And I'm like, I'm just a guy with a community that did this, and we spun up this whole report about 15 minutes before the first LLMs in production roundtable that we had, and we got all kinds of people to take part in it. Speaking of people that took part in it, 1, 2, 3 participants, no, 123 participants took part in it. It sounds cool. It's like, yeah, 1, 2, 3 participants, I'm going to tell you something interesting. No. It's actually 123 participants took part, and that means that it is a relatively small sample size. But it being a small sample size, there is still some clear patterns that we found in the data. And so that is encouraging because it shows that there's a lot of people that are tripping over the same things or having reservations about the same things. All right, so let's get started with the actual report and the meat and what's in it. Before we go to that, let's talk about, I think we have a live stream of every product team since ChatGPT came out. I think that is what they're all doing right now. They are getting inundated with, how can we use AI in this? And they're all running for the hills. That is what is happening. And so what we saw in the report is there's a lot of interest and there is a lot of appetite to use LLMs in production. But that doesn't mean that you can just like start right away, right? So there's challenges in cost. There's challenges in latency, and there's challenges in output variability. I'm going to break down all of those. But that is hindering teams from extracting the most value out of their AI investments. And speaking of AI investments, where are people actually using AI today? Well, we asked what the use cases were, and we saw that there's some clear lines that are being drawn in the sand of where LLMs are useful and where they are not as useful. If you are trying, oh, this is a good slide. I see everybody pulling their cameras up. All right, that's good to know. That's good feedback. Cool. Again, you can get this on the report. So, I mean, I understand if it's easier with this, but so speaking of the use cases that are apt for your LLM projects, the things that you're not going to use LLMs for is anything real-time, right? Like you're not going to, if you're Netflix and you need a recommender system, there's no point in using an LLM for that, and that's clear. But there is really good use cases when it comes to chatbots or text generation, text summarization. You can see that is where it's starting to become very obvious this is a useful tool. Now, I want to talk about 2 of these use cases and do a bit of a deep dive on it. And the first one is what I called niche chatbots. Niche chatbots are things that, I mean, let's just take a step back. The hello world of LLMs and using LLMs, that's like the talk with your data, right? We've all seen that, I imagine, by now coming through. And talk with your data is a glorified niche chatbot. Right? So it's instead of saying, I'm going to use OpenAI's or ChatGPT, and it has this gigantic surface area that it covers, and I don't need to know for my business use case, I don't need to get a poem on the meaning of life. I just need this very niche area that it can work really well in That's the niche chatbot. And there's two really cool examples of this niche chatbot that people talked about, and it's internally facing. So we all know about the chatbots that are externally facing. I don't think that's anything revolutionary that I'm going to tell you about, right? But internally facing, I liked a few different use cases that people brought up. One was when managers are using niche chatbots to quickly get up to speed on different projects and where they're at, so they don't have to like sift through Confluence or Jira and they can just ask the chatbot, what's going on with this project? Or they need to know because they need to make a report, and boom, they can talk with their data, right? So that is a really cool use case. The other cool use case is when you have a subject matter expert that is almost like being coached along the way of their journey. So you can think about some kind of accountant that takes 2 steps forward and then is asked by a chatbot, hey, did you think about this, this, and this? And then they go, okay, cool, yeah, great. And then they take 2 more steps, and then the chatbot is coaching them, right? So those are 2 really cool use cases that came up. The other place that I thought was awesome was in the data enrichment side. And so if any of you are doing any kind of machine learning, you know about the pains and also cost of enriching your data. And synthetic data is real. It's out there, and people are using large language models not only for image generation, synthetic data creation, data annotation, zero-shot, few-shot classifications. And when it comes to the synthetic data generation, I think this has huge implications on what we're doing, because if the cost of data labeling is now just running it through ChatGPT or through a large language model, all of a sudden, that's going to dramatically decrease what we're going through, right? So, and you don't have to pay as much. So, of course, there are a lot of caveats with that. Like, take that with a grain of salt. But it's being used, and people are trying to use it in this way. And it would not be a survey about large language models if it did not contain OpenAI and ChatGPT or GPT-4 and what people were doing with that. I created this graph and a visual, and people did not like it at all. So I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to try and explain what I meant with the graph so that I can walk you through it, because I think it's a very informative graph, but the visual does not make much sense. So what happens here is, and I got to redo this, rethink it, right? But what I tried to say is that you've got people on both ends of the spectrum, the large companies and the small companies, and they are not using OpenAI. But the ones in the middle, they are at a disproportionate rate compared to the 2 ends. And so why might that be? Well, I came up with a theory, and of course, it's just a theory, but here's what my theory is that if you're a small startup, you feel like AI is part of your IP, so you don't want to just farm that out to OpenAI. That's your IP, so you got to figure out how to make it work, because that's what you're doing. Whereas if you're a large company, you probably already have people that are doing stuff with AI, machine learning, and you have the resources, and you probably don't want to just send your data to OpenAI. Even though they say they're not doing anything with that data, they delete it, like, well, we'll see. So you say, we're going to use in-house models. This is our thing, and we're going to keep it in-house, right? But if you're in the middle, maybe your AI feature or product, it's not the main part of what your company's doing, so it's not essential, and you just want to move fast. And so you say, here, take it. We're giving it to OpenAI. It doesn't matter for us, right? So with that in mind, there's special tooling that has come up. And people talked about the different tools that they're using when they're putting large language models into production. And one of these things, out of the 68 people that are using large language models, 23 of them said that they were using some kind of special tooling. So that's a large amount of the yeses were saying, yeah, we had to build something special. And the specific tooling ranges from a modular Python library that interacts with various APIs to figuring out some kind of integration with their vector store or LangChain, whatever. You've got very, very few people that are saying they're just able to send something to ChatGPT and then get value out of it, right? Now, this is probably my favorite answer out of the whole thing, out of all of the survey, and I know you can't see it that well because the contrast is all messed up, but the question was, have you integrated or built any internal tools? And somebody said, just a bunch of shitty scripts that I'm going to have to refactor later, right? And that shows, A, how easy it is to get up and running, but B, like, that's where we're at. This is the state of large language models in production right now. That's what we're doing, all right? So next up, speaking of the state, is that there is clearly a stack that is forming. And this is starting to become very real. Just like you have the mean stack or the MERN stack, there's a generative AI stack that is forming, and that is some kind of vector database. You have your foundational models as the foundation. Great name. You have some kind of tuning or model building or doing something with that if you need it. You have the developer SDKs, and then on top of that, you have some kind of MLOps or monitoring, experimentation. And one thing that we don't really have here, but it's blown up in the last, 2 weeks, is how are you looking at the whole evaluation? How do you evaluate this? And so there's evaluation tools that are coming into the stack too. But this was clear from the survey, the responses, that people are using a handful of these. And so that's your stack if you're looking at trying to get up and running really quick. Next up are challenges. And what kind of challenges are people going through? Oh my God, there were so many challenges. That was like the majority of my time was spent looking at all of the challenges. And I was able to bucket them into 5 key areas. And I want to do a deep dive on my favorite 2, but I'm going to tell you all 5 of them. My favorite 2 were cost and infrastructure challenges. So let's go into the first one is output challenges. So what does output challenges mean? That means the model output hallucinations, explainability challenges, consistency. There's so many challenges around these things, and people are struggling. That was very clear. And we'll get into a little bit of this a little later when I talk about the trust issues that people have. I was going to make a joke, but we'll keep going. So the cost is another one. And when we talk about cost, it's not just infrastructure cost, engineering cost, but you have organizational cost. How much does this actually cost, like, our company to do this? And again, going back to those product teams, like, if you need to shift gears and try and focus on this for a little bit, how much does that cost? You take your eye off the ball. Next one is prompting. There's some challenges, key challenges around prompting, prompt debugging, prompt engineering. I mean, honestly, I call it's like prompting is a dark art, and other people say, like, yeah, it's just a steep learning curve. But it's hard. And so figuring out, if I put this word in a different part of the sentence, I get a completely different output. That is a challenge, because how are you going to know where to put the words? And how are you going to figure that out? How are you going to test the prompts? There's tools that are coming out right now, but it's not at all clear. And that was apparent. The next one is uncertainty. And so uncertainty is something like data privacy, unclear standards, compliance. Is OpenAI going to create an update to the model and all of a sudden all my shit just breaks? That happens. And so if you're using OpenAI and now you can't use it because they updated the model and now your prompts have to change, your output is changing completely, it's all wonky, the SLAs that you're looking at are non-existent. This is when it comes to uncertainty. People are very uncertain with things. And the last one is infrastructure. So infrastructure I'm going to go deep on right now, but let's look at some specific infrastructure challenges. When it comes to infrastructure challenges, we have reliability, size, data, token limits, and latency. Reliability is the first one. What does reliability mean? I think most of you can understand that, but just in case, like I was talking about, testing, reproducibility, changing APIs, scalability. And so your DevOps team is probably having nightmares trying to figure out how they're going to make these LLMs reliable, right? This is the thing that nightmares are made of. And even if you have the best prompts, you cannot force the model to give consistently correct output. And that is a trouble. That is a huge challenge for people. Even if you're tuning the knobs and saying, all right, we're going to do the temperature is going to be way different on this one, it might not. Temperature 0, it might still give the wrong output. It is a very difficult thing when you're looking at reliability. Next one is size, right? Big models, lots of computing power, training times, deployment, memory requirements, size in all regards. Also, training time, response time, and if you're dealing with multiple GPUs, anybody done that before? That's not fun. That is not fun at all, especially when you get up into the hundreds of GPUs. That is like a whole nother beast, right? So next one that people talked about having trouble with is data. And so there's so many open questions around, am I going to fine-tune my model, or am I going to do some vector store and a RAG, the retrieval augmented generations? Which one should I do? Which is better? Or should I just use the whole context window? I don't really know. It's not super clear. And I love with the fine-tuning. I think because has anyone used that stuff online where you can just put your picture in and then all of a sudden you get this character-generated selfie? Or maybe you put a picture of your dog in, and all of a sudden you now have a cool picture of your dog, and you can prompt it with whatever. So they're fine-tuning the models, and it's very easy to do that with these image models. Try and do that with your own data and figure out how easy that is. It's not as easy as just throwing a picture, a selfie of you up there. And so people were talking about how difficult that is when it comes to fine-tuning. The next one is cost, and oh my God, cost. That was huge. And I'm going to do a deep dive on the ROI, because this one is one of the most mentioned pieces in the whole survey. The cost and the ROI. Let's deep dive on it. It came up 41 times, both with people that are using LLMs and people that aren't using them. So we understand that it is one of the major factors when people are thinking about this. Now, we talked about cost, we talked about the infra cost, we talked about the inference cost, we talked about engineering and people cost. But here's the big question. Can you charge more for an AI feature that's externally facing? Because if you can't, now all of a sudden, you just took away from your margin, because you are now offering this AI feature to your people or to your customers, and your cost of goods has gone up. So that's one way of looking at it. Now, what about those issues where you're saying, oh, but I save my customer service people a lot of time? Maybe you save somebody who's being paid 20 bucks an hour, 100 hours in a month, right? And you have that. At what scale does it make it actually viable? Because the cost that you save on the customer service side, potentially you have to pay engineers 200, 300 grand a year, because now you have to get these models and actually host them and figure out how to make it work. So when you're looking at it, you have to think holistically, how do we measure the ROI on this, right? So how much time does it save internally? How can you measure that? How do you measure the ROI for that? And how do you champion that as a project that you need to see to the finish? So these are things that people are asking. These are questions that they were saying. When it comes to the cost conscious, it became clear that people who care about cost, they don't use OpenAI. That is very clear. So people who actually are trying to do this, they said, you know what? We're just going to use some kind of other option, whether that is Cohere or Anthropic, or we're just going to host it ourselves and use an open source model. Trust, the second biggest thing that came up. And trust, it's that model output. It is hallucinations. It is just being able to know that when something is produced, I can actually trust that it's going to be useful and valuable. And it's not going to destroy the reputation of my company, right? It creates, if you have a hallucination, it creates a horrible user experience imagine your customers have to deal with that. And now that's trouble for your company. So one thing that is now like the hottest thing ever in my eyes that people are talking about quite a bit is evaluation. And so at what level are you evaluating? Are you just evaluating the model and the prompts that are going into the model? Are you evaluating the model output? Are you evaluating the whole system and how useful it is with the vector database and that stack that I talked about? What level are you evaluating? There are so many open questions around this, and I don't know of anybody who's doing it really well. And you think about like, okay, we can measure for toxicity, we can measure for like accuracy, but accuracy doesn't just work, right? Because accuracy isn't so clear on most of these questions that are being answered. And when you think about the toxicity, you can have some really bad problems with a model that was trained on a few too many subreddits. That can be a big issue for Karen in HR when she's asking about somebody's salary and it tells her to go kill herself. That is problems. And those things, like, do you really want to introduce that into your internal or external users' workflow? So think about the whole system. People are talking about evaluation. And also, we're going to probably have a little chat after this. If anyone wants to talk about evaluation, we're going to like have a powwow. I know it's the end of the conference, but I know there's a lot of people that think about this, and I don't have enough time to talk about all evaluation things here. But afterwards, if you want to meet, let's talk about evaluation, because that's one of the things that I'm most excited about right now, because it's an unsolved mystery. All right, moving on. When it comes to looking forward, what people wanted to learn are these 4 things. This was the biggest 4 things out of everything. And what this signifies to me, if you look at 3 of these, fine-tuning, inference, and working with OSS models, that shows me people are not happy with OpenAI. Because if they were, they wouldn't need to figure out how the inference works and how to fine-tune, right? Or how to work with open source models. So it shows that people are trying to go deeper, and I have seen that people start really quickly and they get something up and running and they validate a problem with OpenAI, but as soon as you want to go and you want to productionize it and you want to make it yours, then you got to figure out, all right, let's just figure out this one clear problem, and let's not have it be this whole OpenAI like big model that takes forever. It might time out, it might change tomorrow, whatever, right? So that's my talk. I left a few minutes for questions, and I also want to mention that I am in the MLOps community. You can go to MLOps.Community. Actually, these days, I also got that. Actually, somebody in the community got that because it's the hot new buzzword, and I might have to rebrand, I don't know, LLMOps.Community too. And there you can find all the stuff we're doing. We've got all kinds of cool things happening. A podcast that we do. We've got virtual events. We had an LLMs in production conference just a few weeks ago online. It was a lot of fun. And we have meetups in 37 cities around the world, so I imagine we probably have one close to where you are. And that's it. That's my talk. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Feel free to hit me with any questions now. What you got? Yeah, I do. I'll give you that right now. So you just go to, let's see, MLOps.Community/survey/LLM, and then you can get it. And I'm not asking for your email or anything. I don't need any of that. We have enough people in the community and on the email list. I'm not going to just spam you. Anything else from you? I left you all speechless. What do you got?
Just something for you. Actually, earlier, like yesterday, there's another session that is about evaluation metrics for LLMs. It's from Josh Tobin. So I think he has a really great session there. So you should definitely communicate with him.
Yeah. Actually, so Josh was part of the LLMs in production conference that we had, and he was on an evaluation panel that we did. So I'm very familiar. I'm friends with Josh. I know that. Yeah, he's one of the people that are thinking about it. I think there's a lot of people thinking about it right now. I know LangChain just came out with an evaluation thing. I know that there's definitely a lot of energy around evaluation, but the reason is that nobody's doing it well. That's why. So there's a lot of open range. Yeah. So the question is how to do it if it's in different languages, because, yeah, smaller languages that aren't so, the models aren't being trained on as much. I know that there's a company that is, I can't remember their name, but they're specifically for that, right? Like the smaller language translations, and they took that whole part. I think, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. That's completely true. If you're working outside of English, then how are you going to assure that you don't have to have 5 steps, translating, retranslating, validating the translation is correct, and then sending it, and yeah. Yeah, can triple the cost. Things can get out of hand very quick. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of talk about using another model to predict the truthfulness or the confidence of or the accuracy. But the thing is, if the model lies once, why wouldn't it lie twice? And so it's a little bit hard to be able to bet the farm on that. Yeah? Yeah. Let's see, so everyone can see this. Right there, there you go. Nice. Okay, this is cool. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. Awesome, thanks. The question is, what kind of labeling? What? Yeah. For the people over here who probably couldn't hear, it's humans are bad at labeling, so how can we expect models to be better? Yeah, I can see that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just wondering, after you looked at all of the data for the survey, did you get to the end of that and think like, oh, I really wish I'd asked this? Were there any kind of black box
Yeah.
that you really wonder about the breakdown across, so to speak?
Yeah, I think one thing became really interesting to me after the fact that I didn't want to put in, or I didn't even think about putting in, but then later, yeah, exactly that. And I want to do another one of these, and so I'm going to put that in there, is the size of the model that people are using. So if people are using open source, what is it? Is it the 7B? Is it 12B? What are some problems? What are some challenges with a 60B model, right? Because I imagine, what are you doing with 60B or 30B? How is the use case different? That kind of stuff I think is fascinating, so. Anything else? Oh, yeah, yeah. Ooh, so thinking, for everybody that didn't hear it, thinking 5 years ahead, what is still an open question or challenge? I think honestly, for me, it is whether or not we're going to move to a new architecture for the models, because the hallucinations, I'm like not convinced that you can just use some, I'm not convinced that that is a fixable problem with an external tool on the model. I don't know. There's a lot of smart people at Google and in these OpenAI and all that stuff that are doing a lot of work on it. But I think what I've heard is that you need a whole nother way of looking at it. Like the transformer architecture it's always going to hallucinate in some way, shape, or form. So if that happens in 5 years, cool. It might not happen in 5 years, right? Who knows? It took a long time to get to where we are now. Yeah.
So is there any new architecture which is tackling this problem specifically, or people are just trying?
So I don't know the exact, I know that there are people that are trying. They're trying real hard. I don't remember the name. Maybe somebody in here knows. But I do know that I've heard whispers of Google coming out with a model pretty soon, and it's a little bit different. And so I don't know if that means that it's not transformer-based, or if it's just like a better transformer. So that's not clear to me. Yeah?
So a lot of people have been discussing the kind of question of alignment or safety, but it seems to be the case that it's not really focused on any particular thing or actually implementing any specific method. Did you see any salient discussions of alignment or safety in surveys?
No, it's funny, like safety didn't really come up at all. It's funny. I don't know if that's because it was a lot of engineers and they don't care. They're like, I want to know, how do I host this thing? They're not like, I don't care what the safety part is. But yeah, I realized that just a few days ago even. Privacy came up, that was one. But, and it is very funny that safety wasn't mentioned. I mean, I would say that safety maybe came up in one field on one response, like very, very few times, and it's easy to just brush over it, if at all, you know? So I don't know, maybe that's more the researchers that are thinking about that, and there weren't as many researchers. You saw, like, there was only a few researchers that actually partook in this survey. So, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would love to do a second survey. If you all are interested in participating, that would be awesome, whether you're using LLMs or you're not. And I have no idea how I'm going to reach out to all of you now. That's the problem with not getting the email addresses when you download this thing, huh? No, if you're part of the community, you'll probably hear about it. We have the email list, we have the Slack workspace, and we have the podcast, all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in participating, that would be awesome, because I think this is fascinating. I really like this. I don't know if you all enjoyed it, but I love looking at the state that we're at right now. It feels like this is very much like the most advanced thing that I've seen, because you have people who are in the trenches using this, and they're giving their feedback, and we were able to iterate on it so quickly and get it out there so quickly that these big McKinsey and companies, they haven't put out anything on this, right? They have to go through a lot more processes than me saying to a few friends, hey, can you review this? And they give me some peer reviews, and then I go back and take it to the drawing board, and then we get it out quick. So I'm excited to continue doing this. it took off like 5 years of my life. It was so stressful trying to do this because I have never done this before, and that was a whole thing. I had to learn how to write reports, and so actually, I think I have here, I'll show you what the report looks like in case anyone wants to know, and then you can get the whole report. I'll do it on this side though, so you don't have to watch that. So, were there any other questions while we're at it? Not seeing anything? No? There you go. Yeah, my Twitter. Yeah, so I'm active. I'm more active on LinkedIn. My name's Demetrios Brinkmann. I'll pull that up. But also Twitter. If you follow there you go. I'll do that too in case anyone wants to join me on LinkedIn. We have lots of fun stuff going on there. I basically meme about this and people talking about how AGI is going to take over the world, and I'm like, dude, you can't say that right now. Let's be honest. Oh, AutoGPT is going to make all of us useless. It's like AutoGPT just cost me $200 and I still didn't get what I wanted out of it. Give me a break. You can't say that AutoGPT is going to take over the world. This is ridiculous. So I tend to do that on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff. So I just want to pull up the report, the survey, so that you all have it. Here we go. This is what it looks like in case anybody wants to check it out. Pull it over to this screen 1 sec. Sorry, I know it's painful watching me do this on the screen. Oh, come on. There you go. This is it. There you have all of the things that I was talking about, some of the key takeaways, all that good stuff. And LinkedIn is here, in case anyone wants to join me on LinkedIn, and Twitter is here. And where's my profile? So normally I tweet on the MLOps.Community, and we talk about all the stuff going on there. So that's it, I think. Unless anyone has any other questions for me? Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you all for coming.